So, hello, this is your course instructor, Khushwant Patnani. Let us start off with the session where we are doing a revision for the coming JEE and NEET examinations 2020. We are reading currently the chapter Properties of Matter, that is, properties of solids and liquids. And let us start off with the session. In the morning class, we had seen the syllabus until the stress strain relationship. Am I right, Atul? Am I right, Karuna?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
So now let us start off from where we had left. Let us start off with Hooke's law and then proceed ahead accordingly. So we are doing the chapter Properties of Matter. Okay. And let's begin. Right, let's start. So where did we end until last? So there is something called as Hooke's law, right? So there is something called as Hooke's law. What does this Hooke's law state? So until last time, what we had read about the quantities called as stress and strain. I want one of you, Atul, can you just quickly describe whatever we read in the morning in just 1 minute? Yes, Atul, go ahead. A quick revision.
So first we read about what are elastic and plastic bodies.
Okay.
Then sir, should I define them also?
No, no, no. Just tell me the terms. We have read about elastic and plastic bodies. Correct.
Yes, sir. Then
Right.
about stress. Then there are three types of stress: longitudinal, volumetric, and shearing stress.
Right.
Shear stress.
Right.
Shear stress. Then about strain. There are three types of strain: longitudinal, volumetric, and shear strain,
Right.
and how they are related. Their relationship by uh, we saw their relationship with, uh, with the help of a graph.
Okay. Great. Great. So we have seen that stress is force per unit area. We have seen that strain is change of any quantity or change of one dimensional upon the original dimension. Right? Am I correct? And we have also seen that stress is force acting per unit area. This stress can be acting as just Atul described, either it can be longitudinal, or it can be volumetric, or it can be shear. Similarly, strain can also be longitudinal, volumetric, and shear, right? On a similar note, we saw that graph, if you can recall, between stress and strain, right? The graph had certain limits, right? So please make sure that you know which are the limits that you come across one by one. So the first limit that you come across is proportional limit, right? Then you come across another limit, right? Another limit which is called elastic limit. First is proportional, then elastic, right? Then the graph tends to take an upper curve and then a lower curve. So elastic means, I told that if the stress, so this is the graph between stress and strain. We had heard that if we had learned that if the graph goes from O to proportional limit, then to elastic limit, it is very much easy to come back to this same point O. But once the graph has crossed the elastic limit, it is no longer able to come back to the same position. Now, if the graph wants to come back, so come back means, now if I withdraw the stress, now if I withdraw the applied amount of stress, there will still be some amount of strain that will remain in the material, right? That will remain in the material. This is called as permanent set. Please make this note in your diagram. This is called as permanent set. So diagrammatically representing this, let's say I have this material, okay? Now I applied some deforming force, right? I kept on increasing its value. And let's say because of the deforming force, this was the new set of structure or the new dimension for that object. after removal of the force, so let me represent the force by these arrow marks, okay? Now, after I've removed the force, right, what will happen? The restoring force will become dominating, and those forces will try to bring this object back into its original position or original shape, right? But if the applied stress, right, if the two things are possible, if the forces which were acting here, right, were such that the stress, if the stress was below elastic limit, if the stress was below elastic limit, then the object will again regain its original shape. Then the object will again regain its original shape and size, right? So it will be same as this, right? If this, let's say if this is A, it will again become A, right? But if the applied stress has crossed this elastic value, right, if it has become little greater than this, right, in such a scenario, when the stress applied is above the elastic limit, then the material will no longer retain its original shape, will rather end up being a little larger than its value, will end up being a little larger than its original value. So it will be A plus some delta A, right? Some strain will remain, right? Some strain will remain. Is this point clear? And that strain, extra amount of strain that will remain is called as permanent set. Is that point clear? One by one. Karuna.
Yes, sir.
Atul.
Clear.
Yes, sir. Yes,
So
sir.
extra amount of strain, that is delta A by A, or let's say delta L by L, or maybe delta V by V, depending upon whether it is longitudinal, volumetric, right, or tensile, whatever. Depending upon all of that, that is a different scene altogether, right? I think I spoke delta A by A, it should be tan theta, right? So whatever. So the point is, after removal of the force, whether the object will return back to its original dimensions depends on the fact that whether we are within the elastic limit or we have crossed the elastic limit and gone to the plastic zone. That is what the fact is, right? So we had also learned that this part, the left part, is called as the elastic zone, right? Whereas this part is called the plastic zone. Clear? Right? This was the revision of the part done in the morning. Now let us continue from this part for today's class. Now, let's see. So after this, as I told, I am introducing, in fact, making you both revise the concept of Hooke's law, making you all revise the concept of Hooke's law. Any idea, Atul, what does Hooke's law say?
So it tells us about the proportionality relationship between stress and strain.
Absolutely. It says that stress is directly proportional to strain, right? Stress is directly
Yes,
proportional
sir.
to strain, and the coefficient of proportionality is called as E or elasticity. Coefficient of proportionality is called as E or elasticity, right? So this E is given by stress per unit strain. Absolutely correct. Now, this ratio of stress is to strain, you must have understood well, will again be of three types, depending upon we are talking about longitudinal, right, volumetric, or tangential processes. So again, this elasticity, this E is called as elasticity. E is called as elasticity. It is of three types. One is Young's modulus of Y. Second one is bulk modulus, or B. Third is modulus of rigidity or shear modulus. Note them with you. This is Young's modulus. These are three moduli, right? So you can, each plural is moduli, singular is modulus. So each one you can add modulus with them. modulus, right? Modulus. This is Young's modulus. This is Bulk's modulus or bulk modulus. Bulk modulus, whereas eta is called as modulus of rigidity, or you also call it as shear modulus. This is also called as modulus of rigidity. Correct? Now, what will be the value? The first one, Young's modulus, is longitudinal stress by longitudinal strain, right? You can also call this as longitudinal stress, force acting per unit area, right, upon longitudinal strain, that is delta L by L, right? Correct. Now, coming on to the next one, that is bulk modulus. It is again given by force acting per unit area on that bulk of liquid or gas, right, divided by volumetric strain, or it can also be solid, of course, right, divided by volumetric strain, right? Then coming to shear, shear is again tangential force per unit tangential area whole by that phi or tan phi, right? You can also write it as phi or tan phi. Remember, that was x by L. Suppose this was how the object was looking from one side, like a cube. I started applying tangential force on its surface, let's say F tan or F tangential. Then it will start bending. It will start bending, and this distance which it has moved forward, this end, if this end has moved forward by a horizontal distance of x, and this length is L, then this is what x by L or tan theta looks like, or tan phi, whatever. If this is phi, then this will be tan phi. And this is also called as, Karuna, this x by L is called as tangential strain. What is it called as? Tangential strain. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Right? Are we able to recall this, Atul?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So this is how we have learned three kinds of elastic coefficients, or Young's modulus, bulk modulus, and shear modulus, or modulus of rigidity. Please recall and please remember that this A over here and over here are cross section areas, whereas this one is the tangential area, this particular area. See here, where the force is acting, right? Please remember this. This is A tangential, this one. Please draw this diagram. Once you are done writing this entire page on your copies, raise your hand. Yes, class. Okay, now I think both are done. Let's move to the next page. I think all of you have done writing, right? Okay, great. So coming to the next part, we have understood about different modulus of elasticity, right? Different moduli of elasticity. Now let us see, there is something called as Poisson's ratio. Please give the heading Poisson's ratio. The spelling is Poisson. We are seeing the concept of Poisson's ratio. What does it say? So actually in today's class, we'll first of all see the entire theory, right? And then we'll solve numericals, right? Today we'll adopt a different approach, a little different from what we have been doing until now. So the next one is Poisson's ratio. Give the heading Poisson's ratio means, let's say I have, let's say this is a rectangular bar. Okay, this is a rectangular bar. Now what do? I start applying force on it, longitudinal force. Let's say from this side as well as from the other side. We'll draw it in another color. Let's say from here and over here. And this force is equal in value, right? So F and F. What will happen now, Atul? What should happen to this? It should start
Expand.
expanding, correct? Now, great.
Yes,
So
sir.
when it expands, shouldn't it become something like this, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So now mark this thing, that as the length is becoming larger, it is at the expense of the radius. It is at the expense of the radius, right? Correct? So the diameter has
Yes,
actually
sir.
shrunk. The diameter has actually shrunk to another value, right? So let's say if the diameter of this, so let's say I told initially rectangular, I might have called it as cylindrical, right? So if it's cylindrical, right, if the diameter was d initially and now it has become, let's say, d minus delta d, this has to be there, right? Because the amount of material is constant. If you try to increase its length, then its area should decrease because volume is constant. For a constant volume, we have given V given as cross section area into length. So when V is constant and I am increasing the length, of course, the area of cross section should decrease. As the area of cross section is decreasing, therefore diameter is also decreasing. Why? Because A is equal to pi d square by 4, right? Area is equal to pi d square by 4, right? If A is decreasing, then diameter has to decrease, right? It has to decrease. So this is how we develop an understanding of Poisson's ratio. Poisson's ratio is defined as, let's say I call it as PR, right? So Poisson's ratio or PR is given as lateral strain, note it down, lateral strain whole upon longitudinal strain. It is the ratio of strains, lateral by longitudinal. Lateral by longitudinal, right? So lateral strain is strain in the diameter. Strain is always given by change in dimension by original value. So delta D upon D. This is lateral strain. Longitudinal strain means the strain in the length, right? So strain is change in length upon initial length. Correct? Am I clear? Right? You can also write this as delta R by R whole by delta L by L, right? Because we know that radius and diameter are directly proportional. So you can also write this expression in this format, correct? Please jot this down, class. We also denote this by a symbol sigma. We also denote this by a symbol sigma. Now, theoretically, if you see, sigma lies between, sigma should lie between -1 and 0.5. But this was theoretical, but practically it has been observed that for most of the metallic solids, so this was theory. This is what theory says. TH, that is theory. Theory says that sigma value should be between -1 and 0.5. But mostly for metallic solids, it has been observed that sigma value lies between 0 and 0.5. 0 and 0.5. Sometimes you get this as a question in the exams. One or two questions are sometimes theoretical based. So this chapter might give you questions from this. right? Okay, let's move to the next one. Is this entire point clear? All of you? If yes, please raise your hand. If this concept of Poisson's ratio is clear to all of you, please raise your hand. Great. Excellent. I think all are clear. Okay. Now let us take the next concept, right? So the concept is, this one is between the different elastic constants. We just read about, in the previous page, we just read about Young's modulus, bulk modulus, and shear modulus, right? So there are there are in fact two or three relations, right, which are shared between all of them. These are called interrelations between elastic constants. These are interrelations between elastic constants, right? Interrelations between Young's modulus, bulk modulus, and coefficient of coefficient or modulus of rigidity or shear modulus, right? Or sometimes they also call it as coefficient of rigidity. So the values are, Young's modulus is y is equal to 2 eta times of 1 plus sigma. This is one relation. Another one is y is equal to 3 beta times of 1 minus 2 sigma. So out of these two, you have different relations coming out, right? One is 9 by y is equal to 3 by eta plus 1 by beta, or 1 by b, bulk modulus, right? There is one more, sigma given by 3 beta minus 2 eta whole by 6 beta minus plus 2 eta. Now this is way too theoretical, right? So sometimes you might be asked to derive one when the other two are given. So you might use this technique, but such questions are rarely asked. So we'll quickly proceed to the next one, right? So kindly note this down, right? Quickly. Yeah, I'm waiting. As soon as you're done, raise your hand. As soon as you're done writing this page, raise your hand, right? Okay, great. I think all are done. Now let's take next one, a look at next concept. Right. So the next one is, we have a few concepts. The first one is work done. Try recalling the list that we have read this morning. Work done or potential energy stored in a stretched wire. Potential energy in a stretched wire. Right. So let's say we had a wire initially of length L, right? We started applying force on it, equal forces in both directions. Longitudinal stress was developed. Longitudinal stress was developed, right? Because lengthwise the forces are being applied. And let's say it got stretched to a new value of L plus delta L. Because of this force, it got stretched to a new value. Let's say its length was L. Now its length is L plus delta L, right? A total increase of delta L. This one. Correct? It's its current length. Now, as this was done, did I tell you this morning that when we are applying forces, there are also something called as restoring forces acting in the backward direction. Now, always remember, class, that whenever there is a restoring force and you are doing work against that force, when you're doing work against that force, then the object, after the work is done, will have some potential energy which will be stored in the object. It will have some potential energy which will come from the work done against the restoring force. The work done against the restoring force, and that energy is called as elastic potential energy. That is called as elastic potential energy. So that value of elastic potential energy, right, is given by work is half stress into strain. Work per unit volume, work per unit volume is given as half stress into strain. So you can also write this elastic potential energy. Let's say it's represented by W. So W is half stress into strain developed because of the stress times of total volume V. Clear? Now I can also write this as, see here, work is dot product of force and displacement. This is what we have learned until now. And just this morning, we were introduced to the concept of stress and strain, etc. And today we were introduced to the concept, in the evening, we were introduced to the concept of Young's modulus, right? So from this concept, I'm writing something. It's a very beautiful fact. Have a look. Young's modulus Y is equal to force per unit area, right, whole by delta L by L. We have read this, right? Where F by A is longitudinal stress. This is longitudinal strain, delta L by L. Correct? Now, have a look. We have, this is F by A, right? If I represent delta X by X for now, right? Let's say this is small amount of distance, right? X, and I'm representing this entire term FL by AX is equal to Y, correct? See here, so I can write F is equal to YA by FL times of X, right? I can also write this as F is equal to KX, right? But please make sure, please remember that this force is acting in the opposite direction of the applied force, because this is restoring force. This is the restoring force. This is work done is because of the restoring force, right? So work done against the restoring force gets stored as the potential energy. So we can have Kx, let's say equal forces are acting. So let's say this was minus Kx. So this will be equal to Kx, right? At least equal to or greater than that force, restoring force has to be applied. I'll repeat. If the restoring force is minus Kx, then the external force that was applied in order to overcome that restoring force has to be a little greater than or just equal to that force. And that is equal to Kx. We are reading, or we are writing here, work done by that red color F, or the F external, right? That is equal to K into X, where X is the expansion, or X is the original length, perhaps, right? Original length, right? Or the change in that length, a little change, delta L, right? So when we do that, we get Kx square by 2, correct? Kx square by 2, right? Right? So you have to take this, right, from 0 to delta L, right? 0 to delta L, right? So you will have this as I think I've written one thing wrong. There is no F here, right? There is no F here. So F is equal to YA by L times of X. Now have a look. Therefore, this work done by external force, which is stored as potential energy PE, or you can also sometimes we also represent it by U. That potential energy stored, right, is given by half into K, right, into delta L whole square. Correct? What is K? Karuna, what is K?
So YA by L.
Very good. So we have this as YA by L, half YA by L into delta L square. Are we clear with this? Everyone? Anukriti, are we clear with this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Atul, are we clear with this concept?
Yes, sir.
How did we calculate the work done which is stored as potential energy? Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, there are some expressions that you all need to remember. There are some expressions that you all need to remember. Quickly writing them here and transiting to the new topic. So, right. So that is how we define work done by the external force, which is stored as potential energy of the that longitudinal bar. We got that as half K delta L whole square, and we wrote K value as YA by L, right, into delta L times of delta L, right, and this is half. Can somebody tell me what is YA? What is YA by L into delta L equal to? It's equal to F, right? It's equal to F, right? See from here, it's equal to F because X is nothing but delta L, right? So we have this as F into delta L into half, giving you the work done. What I have done, I've substituted this value from the expression that force per unit area times of delta L by L is equal to Young's modulus, and therefore F is equal to Y into A, right, upon L times of X or delta L. So I have used this relation and substituted the value of F in order to get this expression. This is the value of the potential energy, right? So how can I very easily understand this? Let's say I have some body, on that some force was applied, that force is equal to F, right? Let's say because of that force the body changed its dimensions and attained a new dimension, right? Let's say the increase was by delta L, so I write the new length is L plus delta L, right, because of this application of force. Now the potential energy stored because of stretching will be given as that force which is applied into delta L, that is the change in length times of half. Easy to understand, right? And you can always replace this F by YA by L times of delta L if F is not directly given, right? Clear, class? Please jot this down with you. And now let's say the other formula which I was writing, work done per unit volume. Let's also try to derive that. We got work is equal to half F into delta L. Let's divide both sides by volume V. This is volume of the cylinder, or the rope which is in the form of a cylinder, right? This rope, this one, volume of this, right? What will be the volume? This is work done per unit volume, work done per unit volume given as half into F. F can be written as by A, right, by L into delta L whole by volume. And we know that volume is cross section area into length, right? So instead of V, I can write A times of L, and there is already a delta L here, correct? Now, Just cut out the expressions. So we will get half of y by y into delta L by L whole square. Correct? I hope. Just check. Anyone? Atul, can you please check? This is this is something
So
what
correct, sir.
right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now. So let's say I can write this as f times of delta L by L into delta L by L, right? And I already know from here. Have a look, class, in on this expression. On this expression, have a look. This one. Here I have f into this one f into or delta L by L
So
can be written as f by ya, right? F by ya, correct?
excuse me, sir.
Yeah. Tell me.
So I think delta L by L whole square will not come. Only delta L by L will come.
This is delta L, no? Delta L into delta L, and here we have L into L. See here?
But we substituted F now, sir.
I think I'll just recorrect. Yeah, that's why I asked. Yeah, no issues, no worries, no issues. Let's redo it. So where did we end, right? We'll start from where we began this point again. No issues. We are calculating work done per unit volume, correct? Work done per unit volume. We had got work done is equal to half F into delta L. Divide by volume, correct? Divide by volume. So you'll get F upon A times of L into delta L, correct? Now, what is force per unit area equal to? Stress, right, Atul?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Force per unit area is stress. Write it over.
Yes, sir.
Now, what is delta L by L equal to?
Strain.
Strain. So we get this as half stress into. Now is it
Strain.
clear, Atul?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now what I was deriving can be derived from this expression itself, right? Because you have y is stress by strain. Y is stress by strain. Please remember, this is not work done. Half stress into strain is not work done. It is work done per unit volume. It is W upon V, right? Volume of that object. Very important. So please take this down as your note. So this is the formula for work done per unit volume. Please take down this formula, and once done, raise your hand. Yes, class. Is it clear? Everyone, if yes, please raise your hand. If this derivation is clear for all, please raise your hand. Atul, you want to ask something? Yes, Atul, ask. Yeah. Okay, done. Okay, great. Now what I was trying to write from this expression, right? From this expression, you can express stress in terms of strain or strain in terms of stress. So let's say I write stress is equal to y times of strain, right? Over here. So you will have half into, instead of strain, you'll write y, and stress will be 2 times. So you'll have stress square into y by 2 will give you work done per unit volume. Work done per unit volume. Let's take a look at the next concept. Next one is, try recalling. In the morning I talked about thermal stress. I talked about thermal stress. Give the heading. Atul, can you give an idea about thermal stress? What does it seem to be? Up here.
So I think if we heat up a body, it will expand or something like that.
Yes, absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. But not what, there is a condition to it. Let's see. So here, have a look. Let's say we have two walls, okay, and in between the walls, there is some rod. There is some rod. Let's say like this. This is the rod between the two walls. What's happening is, so just 1 minute. Right. What's happening is, I am now heating this rod. I am now heating this rod. You are given with the parameters of the rod, different parameters. Like, let's say you're given its length is L, right? Let's say you're told that its cross-sectional area, right? This area. The cross-section area of the rod is A, right? Then you're also told that its Young's modulus is Y, correct? So there are some values that you know about this rod. What you do, you now start heating it. You now start heating it. So what should happen, Atul, when I heat a rod?
So I think it will expand.
And it will at least
The
try,
width will expand.
it will try to expand, right?
Oh, yes,
But if the wall is very firm, it would not allow this rod to expand, correct?
yes, sir.
Now, this agenda or this thing, that this condition where strain is getting produced in the body or the deformation of body is being prevented. Here, had the wall not been there, this rod would have expanded. But now that the rod is there, now that the wall is there, this rod cannot expand, and therefore, because this wall or because this rod is not being able to expand, so you can write this as a note, because of the rigid walls, the rod does not deform. Therefore, thermal stress develops. In the rod. Therefore, thermal stress develops in the rod. So this rod is heated. The rod is trying to expand. It is exerting some force on the rod, on the wall, but the wall is not moving. So because of this force which is there, right? Because of the force which is there is some thermal stress. Right? I call that thermal stress, or I write the definition of it is force acting again per unit area is the thermal stress, right? And let's say the coefficient of linear expansion of the rod is alpha. So this is a concept from the chapter thermal expansion, right, where it says that whenever a rod is heated, let's say here's the rod, okay, let's say a rod is heated, okay, and every substance has this natural tendency or natural way by which it heats up, okay, and a natural limit to it. So let's say I heat up a substance by a temperature of delta theta, and it has a coefficient of linear expansion. This is called as coefficient of linear expansion, alpha. Let's say it has coefficient of linear expansion alpha, and let's say its original length was L, and upon heating there was some change in length as delta L. There was some change in length as delta L. then we write, there is an expression given as delta L is equal to L times of alpha delta theta. That means because of heating, this would have been the change in length, that is original length times of coefficient of linear expansion times of change in temperature. This would have given you the change in length had the wall not been there, right? So from this expression in the yellow color, we can find out delta L by L value, right? Delta L by L value, right? Let us write that delta L by L value. What can I call this delta L by L value, Anukriti? Strain, right? We can call this as strain. And because it is because of thermal conditions or heat conditions, I will call this as thermal strain. So this is that value of strain that could have been there had the wall not been present. Right? So this is that value of thermal strain, right? Then we of course have written thermal stresses F by A and thermal strain also. So we can find out the value of force. So let's see what is the force that is acting along the rod right now, right? So we have Y is equal to force per unit area whole by delta L by L, right? Now by F per unit area, and instead of delta L by L, I can write as alpha delta theta, correct? This will be F upon A, that is cross section area, into alpha, that is coefficient of linear expansion, into delta theta. So I have the force, right? The force or the compressive force which is generated in the body, or the tensile force or the compressive force which is generated in the body, whatever, that F is equal to Y, Young's modulus, into cross section area, into coefficient of linear expansion, into delta. Right? Please remember this, class, a superbly important definition or formula. So this is that compressive or tensile force produced in the body. Compressive or tensile. Do you remember today morning we had read that longitudinal stress can be because of, it can be either compressive or tensile, right? So what's happening is this rod is trying to push the wall in the right and left directions. Similarly, because rod is actually not moving, that means definitely wall is also applying a force on the rod. Wall is also applying a force on the rod in the opposite direction. Recall Newton's third law, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So the rod is trying to make the wall move and the wall is trying to make the rod move, but nobody is successful, right? Both of them are just trying it. And that force which each of them is applying on the other, the rod on the wall and the wall on the rod, is given by this. It's the compressive or tensile force, right, produced in the rod. Produced in the rod. Correct? So once you have understood this and written this down, raise your hand. Yes, class. Once you have completed writing this and understood it, raise your hand. Yes. All right, great. So let's move ahead. The next concept is of viscosity. The next concept is of viscosity. So, any idea, Karuna, have you heard about viscosity before?
Yes, sir. We had experiment.
Oh, you did. Okay, great. So, what is viscosity? Any idea? Any rough idea?
So we took oil in a tube and we had to drop some beads. So the time for the bead to reach the bottom, we had to calculate that. Something like that.
Such a vivid memory, such a vivid memory. I really appreciate this example. So, Anukriti, any memories from your end? Anything that you would like to tell? What do you interpret by viscosity?
Sir, viscosity is the opposition a fluid does to flow.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely
And
correct. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, and we had physics practicals in 11th, sir,
Right, right.
the one that Karuna told.
Uh-huh. Good. So, class, what we are understanding is Karuna is telling about an experiment that they did in class. An experiment that they did in class. What was the experiment and why is it necessary, or why was it necessary to perform in the lab, right? So, first of all, let us understand what is viscosity. Viscosity is basically, in very rough terms, if I want to define it, it is the liquid friction or friction which is acting in the liquids. What is friction? Friction is some kind of force which tries to prevent relative motion, right? Friction is a force which tries to prevent the relative motion. So if I say friction in is acting within liquids also, then I will call that friction as, or maybe not friction, that property which is causing that friction, right? So the property of the liquid which causes friction is called as viscosity. Property of the liquid which causes friction within the liquid is called as viscosity, right? So it tries to prevent relative motion between the layers of the liquid, let's say I have a cylinder, okay, and from this, let's say a pipe, okay, from this, let's say water is flowing. So it is believed that whenever water flows, generally in a streamline flow or in a very regular kind of flow, it flows in the form of layers. One layer, above it there is another layer, then there is next another layer, right, and so on and so forth, right? So these layers are kind of rubbing against each other. These layers of water, they are rubbing against each other, right? So as they are rubbing against each other, the centermost layer has the highest velocity. The layers below it, this seem to have a lesser velocity, right? Now the friction or the opposition which is acting between the layers, that is, one layer is trying to prevent the other layer from moving. Why? I will tell you once again. Have a look. We have a cylinder, right, or a pipe through which a liquid is flowing. Now this liquid has several layers. So one layer which is in contact with the solid, one layer which is in contact with the solid below, one layer which is in contact with the solid below is said to have zero velocity, while the layers above it are of course moving, right? And each one has a velocity little higher than the velocity of the adjacent layer. So, whenever this kind of thing is happening, we are very sure that there is some friction acting between the layers. So there is some liquid friction acting here between the layers, between the adjacent layers, which is preventing the other layer, which is trying to prevent the other layer from moving. I will repeat. See here. Let's say my one of the palms is representing one liquid layer. This is another layer which is just adjacent to it. This another palm. This layer is not moving. It's steady. It's constant, right? Now the layer above it is trying to move. It's trying to move. See, one layer is steady. One layer is not moving. The layer above it wants to move. Wants to move. Is there a relative motion between them? Atul, is there a relative motion between two layers if one is constant, the other is trying to move?
Yes, sir.
Right? So this phenomena where one layer is trying to move with respect to the other layer, or the relative motion between layers is happening, liquids, because of their inherent property, try to prevent this relative motion, and the property because of which this phenomena or this preventing of liquid layers moving against each other happens, right? This prevention happens. That property is called as viscosity. So viscosity is the property due to which liquids tend to retard their own motion. Or one layer tries to retard the other layer of the liquid. That property because of which this happens is called as viscosity. Let's say if I give you a very real-time example, the example is that of a honey and water. So Karuna, can you tell me which one do you think would flow very easily? Would flow from a jar. Let's say I have a jar. One jar has honey in it and another jar has water in it. When I try to spill them on the ground from a height, what would happen? Which one do you think will come out faster and would flow to in the bottom easily, and which one do you think should take time to come out and then flow? Yeah.
So water will flow out easily and honey will take time.
The honey will take time, right? Why should this be happening now? Can you guess? Why should this be happening? Because honey is more viscous than water. Right? So,
Yes, sir. Yes.
are you understanding what does viscosity mean now in terms of liquid? When one layer of the liquid prevents the other layer from moving, then such a liquid might be having more viscosity than the other liquid. Let's say layers in honey are preventing another layers in honey from moving, whereas the same is not true for water. There the friction might not be very high. Friction is not a exact or right term, but then yes, in order to relate, it's very efficient. Is everybody clear what's viscosity, right? So let's say there are two liquids, okay? I try and put a ball in both the liquids. Okay? So let's say here there is a ball, whereas also here there is a ball. So which liquid should allow the ball to reach faster on the floor? Karuna. And now since you have suggested the experiment, try telling me. Let's say I leave a ball here in both the liquids at the surface. One liquid is honey, right? This is honey. Whereas next one is water. Yeah. In which one of them ball should reach faster on the bottom of the vessel?
The water, bead in the water.
Absolutely, because water has lesser resistance between its layers, right?
Yes, sir.
So it will allow the ball to quickly come down over here, whereas honey will try to prevent the motion of the ball motion of the ball because there is
Viscosity.
there is higher viscosity in honey. So we don't say that there is no viscosity in water, just that the viscosity of water is lesser than that of honey. Lesser than that of honey. So let's say after time t, let's say at t is equal to 0, both were at the top. So at some time t, right, if we observe after some time, maybe this ball has reached the bottom in water, whereas in uh, honey chamber, the ball is still moving downwards because its motion is slower. Why is it slower? Because the viscosity is lesser. Viscosity is lesser in water than in honey. Viscosity is represented by this letter mu, right? So I think now it was pretty good amount of discussion on one topic. Let's quickly move to the next one. Before that, we have this force acting between two layers. Let's say if that force is F. Let's say if that force is F, right? And let's say the tangential area, this area of one layer of liquid is A and viscosity is mu, right? And let's say the difference between velocity of the two layers, right? Difference between the velocity of two layers is delta V and the thickness of the layers is delta Y. Thickness of one layer is delta Y, right? And the difference between velocities is delta V. So I mean, let's say one layer is moving with velocity V and the other is moving with velocity V minus delta V, right? So we will have the force acting between the two layers is given by minus of eta, right? Minus of eta into that area, tangential area A times of delta V upon delta Y. I'll derive or I'll describe these expressions again, right? So this entire expression delta V by delta Y is also sometimes written as dV by dy or dV by dr, and it's told as and it's called as velocity gradient. That is, how is velocity changing with respect to height from the ground? Velocity gradient, right? This A is the area of the layer of liquid, area of liquid layer. Which area? Tangential area. Tangential area of liquid layer, right? And of course, this eta, sometimes you also denote it by eta. Sometimes you also denote it by eta and not mu. So then you can write here instead of mu, you can write eta, right? So it's up to you, right? Take one symbol and stick to it. So this eta is nothing but viscosity, right? And this is the force between the opposing force, which is causing or opposing the relative motion. This is the force opposing relative motion between layers, right? Written it down, everyone? If yes, please raise your hand. Okay, Atul? Okay. Now I'm telling you all a very beautiful concept. Another beautiful concept. It's called as terminal velocity. You know, try recalling. Have we read this before? Karuna, have you read this term before? Terminal velocity somewhere in practicing some point?
Yes, sir.
Ah,
Yes, sir.
try recalling what was terminal velocity.
So the final velocity.
Absolutely. Final velocity. And when we were calculating, what did we do? We had taken A or acceleration as 0 and obtained it again, right? Do you remember that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So when A is 0, it means what should acceleration is 0. That means definitely force is equal to
0.
0. So what does this mean? When in any liquid or in any fluid, when a body is falling, so let's say I have some fluid, it can be gas, it can be liquid. In some fluid, let's say an object is falling down. An object is falling down. As the object is falling down, as the object is falling down, what all forces will act on it? Atul, as the object is going down, what all forces do you think will act on it? Tell me how will we draw the free body diagram of this ball which is falling down in in a fluid? One of the very beautiful examples of this is, let's say it's raining. Let's say it's raining, okay? These are the clouds and these are the raindrops. Let's say I want to consider one raindrop. So this is the raindrop, which is the object, and it is present in a fluid. So this is the raindrop, and this raindrop is present in a fluid. And what is that fluid? Air. What is that fluid? Air. So this is one example of the free body diagram which we are taking. Let's say we are drawing the free body diagram of this raindrop which is falling down in a fluid, that is air. Yes, Atul, tell me what should be the forces that must be acting on this given raindrop. Yes, let's say it's mass. Take the mass of of the raindrop as m. One will be mg, right? It's down.
Yes, sir. And
One will be mg. Now, because it is moving downwards, there is, I'll define one term. It's called as drag force. It's called as drag force. Drag force is a force which acts against any body because of the viscosity of the liquid. So that drag force should be acting in the upward direction. Why? Because the raindrop is falling in the downward direction. So the drag force is basically just like friction. This is friction, right? So because of viscosity, there is some force acting, right? That force is called as drag force, right? And let us represent it by FD over here. Drag force, which is trying to prevent the motion of the body. It always acts in the opposite direction of motion, right? So one will be drag force. Atul, can you recall if there is any other force that acts from your syllabus? Try recalling. Whenever a solid is present in a fluid, is there any other force that acts on it apart from weight and in this case drag force? Any other force that acts on it? Buoyancy, right? Buoyancy, correct? What is
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
what is buoyancy? Buoyancy is a force which acts
Upward.
upward, or sometimes it's not always upward, but you can see in the opposite direction of net G, right? Let's say G is acting in this case downwards, so buoyancy will act in the opposite direction of G. So G is downwards, therefore buoyancy will act in the upward direction. So this is the condition.
Yes, sir.
I'll repeat the condition. What is happening? We have a raindrop. It is falling downwards, okay? Because it is falling downwards, the liquid friction or drag force, which is the force because of viscosity, that is acting in the upward direction, right? Now, that force only acts when the body is moving. Please remember, this drag force only acts when the body is moving, right? And here we also have this buoyancy, which is acting in the upward direction, and the weight mg, which is acting in the downward direction. Okay. Now we have, at some time, when the net force becomes 0, then I can write FB, that is buoyant force, plus drag force, that is FD, is equal to the weight acting downwards. Am I correct? Atul, am I correct?
Yes, sir.
After some time, the two forces acting in the upward direction is equal to the force acting in the downward direction. This would be the scenario when the net external force is zero. Am I correct? Right?
Yes, sir.
Because we can write, because force is a vector quantity, so we can write the force along with the directions, right? Or in order to denote the direction, I'm taking upward as positive, let's say, and downward as negative. So these two are positive forces. The net force is zero. So you have buoyant force plus drag force is equal to mg, right? Now, in case of a sphere, Fd is given as 6 pi eta rv. This is special value of drag force for a sphere, for a spherical body of radius r, for a spherical body of radius r, moving with a velocity v. And there is generally a sign of minus here. Why should there be minus sign here? Because it's in the opposite direction of velocity. So if the velocity is downwards, this drag force is in the upward direction. So if I don't put minus, I can just write if v is downwards, this drag force will be in the upward direction. So moving with velocity, please take this down. Drag force is given by 6 pi eta rv, where r is the, so this is the special value of drag force which is given for a spherical body of radius r. This is many times asked in the questions class, many times. Viscous force or drag force, you also call this as viscous force because it's acting because of viscosity, right? This viscous force is given by 6 pi eta rv. Its magnitude is given by this value, right? Similarly, buoyant force is given by volume of the body, right, which is immersed in the liquid times of density of the liquid, right, into g. This is the value of buoyant force. And here mg, we know m is volume of the body, total volume of the body into density of the solid into g. Correct? So we have at this time when the sorry, when the net force is zero, at such a time the v value is called as v terminal. So now instead of writing v here, I can write this v is v terminal or final velocity. Terminal velocity or final velocity when the net force on that object has become zero. So from here, this is your homework. Try and calculate what is vt coming equal to. You will get this expression. Vt is equal to 2 by 9 times of r square into density of solid minus density of liquid, right, into g, right, whole by eta. 2 by 9 r square rho s minus rho l g by eta. Anukriti, I want you to repeat this, or maybe just tell this to us one more time. Just the expression of terminal velocity. Yes, Anukriti, go ahead.
Terminal velocity is equal to 2 by 9 r square rho s minus rho l g by eta.
Very good. Tell me what is r, g, and eta, and also rho s and rho l. Give me the variable description. Yes.
R is the radius of
Yeah.
the body that is falling down.
Okay.
G is the gravitational gravity
Acceleration due to gravity.
force.
Acceleration due to
Acceleration due
gravity.
to gravity.
Yes.
Gravity. Rho s and rho l are densities
Of solid and liquid.
and of
Right.
solid and liquid.
Right.
And eta is the constant, viscosity constant.
Excellent. Karuna, I also want you to repeat the definition once again, or basically the formula once again. Vt is equal to 2 by 9 r
2
square
by
by
9.
eta into rho s minus rho l. Yes, go ahead.
Vt is equal to 2 by 9 r square of rho s minus rho l of g by eta.
Right? Please remember this formula. You might be asked this question in so many varieties that you can't even imagine. We'll do that. We'll of course do that in the coming sessions. But yes, just make sure that this formula is by heart for you, because every time this derivation might not be possible, right? So this formula, not exactly, but you should know these things, right? See here, that V terminal is proportional to R square and inversely proportional to eta. At least we can remember this, right? And into rho s minus rho l. Can we remember this? Atul, at least this proportionality can we remember, Atul?
Yes, sir.
So now, Atul, let's solve a question based on this. Now, too much of theory.
Sir,
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
You want to ask something?
sir,
Go.
when, yes, sir. So
Yeah.
when does V become VT, sir?
V becomes equal to Vt whenever the net force on the system is becoming zero. So here,
Oh,
this is a particular case that we have taken. Otherwise, V will just be V. It will dynamical. It will be dynamic. It will keep on changing, right? Because why will it keep on changing? See here, what is happening? This object, I'll tell you. So see here, weight is acting downwards, correct? So because of the weight, the body will come down, and the body is coming down initially with this force, right? With the net force, which is weight minus Fd minus Fb, correct? Correct? So
yes, sir.
let's say the body started with zero velocity. Let's say body started with zero velocity. So when the velocity is zero, will there be any drag force?
No, sir.
No, right? Because drag force is directly proportional to velocity, correct?
Well, yes, sir.
Correct. Now there is no drag force, okay? But as soon as it goes down, as soon as it goes down because of the weight mg, right? And net force as mg minus fb, let's say it goes down, it will have some velocity, right? The raindrop will attain some velocity, correct?
Yes, sir.
Because of this velocity, what will it get? Drag force acting in the upward direction, right?
Yes, sir.
Correct. Now, because of this drag force, that is one more force is acting in the upward direction, would imply the velocity will now start decreasing, right or not? Right? The
Yes,
velocity will
right,
start
sir.
decreasing, and it will keep on decreasing until it attains a constant value. Until it attains a constant value.
Constant.
When will that happen? When will V become equal to Vt? When the net force on the system will become zero, which means that the buoyant force and the drag force acting in the upward direction will become equal to the net force acting in the downward direction. That is the.
Downward direction.
Are we clear, Atul?
Yes, yes, sir.
Pakka?
Yes, sir.
That terminal velocity is that value of velocity which the object will attain at t tending to infinity, or finally, we also call it as finally, when the drag force and the buoyant force upwards are becoming equal to the weight acting downwards. This is the condition for object to attain its terminal velocity. Are we clear?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. Now, tell me one thing, a very beautiful thing. Let's say there are two balls, okay? One ball has mass, let's say one ball has mass 2m. The other ball has mass 8m. Let's say I'll change them. Let's say this ball has mass 8m while the other ball has mass 2m. Both are falling down. They are made of the same material. That is, the density is rho s, same for both. They are falling down in a viscous liquid. I want you to compare their terminal velocities. Vt1 is to Vt2. Karuna, what should we do? We don't
So
know
the
their rate.
formula,
Yeah, tell me the proportionality. Vt is proportional to
R square
uh-huh
uh, rho s minus rho L by eta.
eta. Now, since both of them are in the same liquid, so eta is same for both.
Yes, sir.
Eta is the property of the liquid, viscosity. So eta is same for both. Both are made of the same material. So rho s is also same, right? Also, they are in the same liquid, therefore liquid density is also same, right? Now terminal velocity will depend on
Radius.
terminal velocity will depend on radius. But we don't know the radius. We know the mass. We don't know the radius. We know the mass. What to do now? This is the challenge. Can one of you try to figure out how do you now find out the relation between terminal velocity and mass, when the relation between radius and terminal velocity is given? This is the question. This is the working. Yes. Anyone? I'll help you. Don't worry. Atul, would you like to try it out?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Uh,
Tell me if there
so
is a relation. Yeah, yeah. Okay, go ahead. You want to say something? Yeah.
yes. So we know the relation between density and volume.
Wow.
Density to
Yes, tell me. Density is equal to mass per
mass by
unit volume.
volume. Yes, sir.
Now, for both
Uh,
of them, density is same.
yes, sir.
It means that mass will be proportional to volume.
Yes, sir.
And we
Okay.
know that volume is proportional to radius cube.
Yes, sir.
It means that mass is proportional to r cube.
Yes, sir.
It means that mass
BT is
power 1 by
proportional.
3 is proportional to r.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now we know that terminal velocity is proportional to r square. In
Yes,
this
sir.
case, it is just proportional to r square because eta is same for both. Rho s and rho l are also same for both. Now, therefore, instead of r, what can we substitute? M power
M power 1 by 3 to the whole
square, right? Instead of r, we'll substitute m power 1 by 3. We have a square of it. So what should be Vt proportional to?
M power 2 by 3.
Super duper important. This would mean that Vt, or terminal velocity of one ball, is to terminal velocity of second ball is equal to 8m whole by 2m whole to the power of 2 by 3, right? Cancel them off. The value is not required. So you'll have, either you can write this as 2 to the power 4 by 3 is to 1, or maybe you can try to find out the value of it. If you can, well and good, right? Is it clear, class? Everyone? If yes, please raise your hand. If you're clear with the relation between terminal velocity and mass of the object when radius is not given, how do you find it out? If you're clear, please raise your hand. Yes, class. And if there are any queries, feel free to let me know. Excellent. If you have understood this very well, let's transit to the next concept. Telling you all something called as Stokes' law. Actually, we have already discussed it. This relation, no, which we just told, that drag force is equal to 6 pi eta rv. This is also called as Stokes' law. Please take this down. So Stokes' law is basically telling you what is the viscous force or the drag force. Drag force is also called as viscous force. Force due to viscosity. So drag force or viscous force is for a spherical body is given as 6 pi eta rv is the Stokes' law. Stokes' law says that viscous force or F drag or drag force for a spherical body which is flowing in a liquid with velocity v, for such, and the liquid has a viscosity of eta, then for such a body there is a drag force which is acted by the liquid upon the body in the opposite direction of velocity and is given by 6 pi eta r v. Okay. Now, can you try this, Karuna? If now we know the relation between terminal velocity and mass, can we find out the relation between drag force and mass? Try.
Yes.
Yeah, try with me. So here drag force is proportional to R into V, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, if I say the object has reached its terminal velocity, so I already know terminal velocity is proportional to R square, right?
Yes, sir.
So I can say that drag force or viscous force is proportional to R
R.
into R square, that is R cube, correct?
Yes, sir.
This is one relation. Now, do we know the relation between this radius and mass? We just
Yes, sir.
derived. Radius is proportional to m power 1
1 by
by
3.
3, right?
Yes, sir.
So we will have
FD proportional to M.
absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. How did it come? In case somebody got any confusion, let me write it here. So we have R is proportional to m power 1 by 3, or we can also write R cube is proportional to m from here, and therefore we get viscous force is directly proportional to mass. Right? Clear?
Yes, sir.
So suppose had I asked in the last question another part of the same. Tell me what is the ratio of viscous force which is acting on the first body is to the ratio of viscous force acting on the second body. Tell me. You would have written viscous force is proportional to
M.
m. Therefore, the ratio between
8 M.
forces would be
8 M by 2 M.
8m
That's
by 2.
4.
That is 4 is to 1. Right?
Yes, sir.
Easy to understand now,
Yes, sir.
everyone. Is this clear? These are superb type of numericals which can appear in your exam, and I'm sure you'll be so thankful that you had come across them someday and you practiced them. You revised all of this. Class, there is a relation called as, there is a number called as Reynolds number. I hope you must have done some experiments about it in the lab. Have you all, Karuna, Anukriti? Are there some experiments that you all do in their school for Reynolds number? No issues. If
No, sir.
no issues, if not, maybe in college levels sometimes you might try some engineering students, right? Some engineering students do this experiment, right? I think in their first or second year. So Reynolds number is basically a dimensionless number. It's a dimensionless number. It has no dimension. It is tried to distinguish between the different type of flows. I'm repeating, it will try to classify different types of force. In order to classify, flows, FLOWS, in order to classify different types of flows, in order to classify the flows or the type of flows, we use this number. It is given as rho V d by mu. Rho V d by mu. So had I told you all that there is an app called NTA Abhyas? Yes, I believe, right? I had told this to you all. So in that NTA Abhyas, I think there was one question which had popped up. Let me try and recall what that question was. That was based upon this concept. So yeah. So look here. The question was that you have a pipe, and from that pipe water is coming out. From that pipe water is coming out at a rate 100 liters per minute. 100 liter per minute. Okay. You were told that viscosity of water is equal to 1 millipascal. Viscosity of water viscosity. So this is for JEE NT Abhyas paper number 9. So you had viscosity, or sorry, yeah, eta value was given as 1 millipascal second. 1 millipascal second. If you all would like to note down the unit of viscosity, it is Pascal seconds. I think whether second is there or not, I might be confusing. Just try to check this once. Yes, I'm correct. Pascal seconds. Yeah, we are correct. We are absolutely correct. So the rate of water coming out was given as 100 liters per minute. The eta value is given as 1 millipascal per second, 1 millipascal second, right? Then we are also given with the density of water. We all know also that is 1000 kg per meter cube. You are supposed to find out Reynolds number. You are supposed to find out Reynolds number. How would you do it? Anyone? Atul, can you try? Tell me the formula. R is
Yes,
equal,
R equals to rho V
by mu,
yes.
right? Now, how can I relate velocity and volumetric flow? Any idea?
Velocity and volume.
See,
The
yeah, tell me. Volumetric flow is volume per unit time,
volume
right?
yes.
So I can write, let's say this is, I denote this by Q. So Q is volume per unit time. Now volume is cross section area into length, right?
Yes, sir.
So upon T. So length per unit time is velocity.
Yes, sir.
So what can I write? Volumetric flow is nothing but A into V. Volumetric flow is A into V. So now I can replace V by, tell me. Now I can replace V by Q by A, right? See here, we had the expression of Reynolds number is rho Vt by mu, where V is the velocity with which the flow is there, D is the diameter of that object. I think I did not tell this before. D is the diameter of this object, or sometimes if you're talking about a liquid flow, then we'll talk about the diameter of the pipe. So let's say diameter of the pipe is D. Then this is that D, okay? V is the velocity of the liquid in it, right? Rho is the density of the liquid and mu is the viscosity of the liquid. Are we clear, everyone? Reynolds number is equal to rho V D by mu, where? One by one. So, Atul, what is rho?
Density of the liquid
Okay, what is D?
or diameter of the pipe.
Pipe. What is mu? Anukriti. Yes, Anukriti, what is mu? Viscosity.
Viscosity.
Absolutely. Right. What is V? Karuna.
The velocity with which the liquid is
Liquid is moving. Very good. Very good. Right. Now, we just discovered that rate of flow is area into velocity. So here I can write instead of velocity, V is equal to rate of flow per unit cross section area, right? So I can write Q by cross section area, correct? Right? Now this will become rho into Q into D upon mu, and instead of A, I can substitute pi d square by 4. So all of these values were given in the question. So we'll have 4 into Q rho pi mu, right? And here we'll have a D, right? Am I correct? Can you just check, Atul? This was a question. So this is the result that we had got, but this is nothing to be remembered. All that you have to remember is this. And of course, this equation, that volumetric flow is area, cross-section area into velocity. Easy to remember. Everyone, right?
So,
Yeah. Tell me.
so won't D be in the denominator?
D will be in denominator. Thank you. But the concept is clear, right, Karuna?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Excellent. Kudos for that attention. Good. Now, class, there is something called as continuity equation. Right? So what does this continuity equation mean? Continuity equation says that whenever a mass of fluid is flowing from one place to another, the mass which was initially there, same mass will be present later. Let's say there is some compression in the liquid, even or in that gas, even in such case, mass is conserved. So continuity equation is basically the equation of conservation of mass. Is that point clear, everyone? Right? Now, therefore, mass flowing per unit time, we denote it by m1 dot and m2 dot. So m1 dot basically means m1 per unit time. M2 dot basically means M2 per unit time. Mass flowing per unit time is constant, correct? Or if that creates a confusion, just write M1 is equal to M2. Now let's bring it to the real form of continuity equation, which will be required to utilize in our questions. Let me divide both sides by T. So this is basically a mass of the liquid, right, which has traveled from one part of the pipe to another part, right, in time t, right? So this is mass flowing per unit time. This is also mass flowing per unit time. This is in part one. This is in part two. They are connected, right? They are connected. So we have density is equal to mass per unit volume. So Atul, what can we write instead of mass? Tell me.
Density into volume.
Rho into volume, right? Here we'll have rho 1 V1, right? Upon T, correct? This will be equal to rho 2 V2 upon, correct? Now we can write volume as, Atul, volume is equal to area into length, right?
Yes, sir.
So therefore we'll have rho A and L by T will become velocity. So we'll have rho AV is equal to rho AV. So rho AV on one side is equal to rho AV on the other side, where rho is density, A is cross section area, whereas small v is velocity of that fluid. So basically the point is, let's say one liquid was over here, let's say like this, right? Now this liquid traveled from one position to another position. Now in doing so, and when this is happening, this portion of the liquid is basically traveling inside a pipe. So in order to even better elucidate this, let me draw a cross section of the pipe altogether. So let's say there is some liquid flowing. Let's say when this liquid was over here, its velocity is v1 and the area of cross section of this part is equal to a1, and at this point of time the liquid has density rho 1, and when the liquid has traveled to the new part, say this one, let's say at this point of time, its velocity has become v2, its area has become a2, this cross section area of this pipe, right? And let's say now its density has changed. Generally, liquids are incompressible, but if the liquid or that gas or that fluid is compressible, then let's say its density has changed. So what does the word compressible mean? When any fluid is allowed to change its density, or when it is susceptible to change of density, such a fluid is called compressible. Compressible means density change possible for the fluid. So fluids can, if they are having a density change, then such fluids are called as compressible fluids, right? So let's say this fluid, and I think you all already know that fluids are of two types. Either they can be gases or they can be liquids, right? So here, let's say a fluid has traveled from one part of the pipe to another. As we have just learned that mass is conserved, and we have derived from this expression that rho1 v1 a1 will be equal to rho2 v2 a2. This is called the expression of continuity equation. See, continuity in, if the liquid is traveling in continuum from one part to another part, then the mass is conserved. This is the equation for a compressible liquid which can change its density. Let's say if the liquid is not compressible, then if the liquid is non-compressible, right, in that case its density will not change, and therefore density on both sides will be same. So rho1 and rho2 will get cancelled, and we will have the equation as a1 v1 is equal to a2 v2. A1 v1 is equal to a2 v2, right? Please take this down as a note. This is called as equation of continuity. One is for compressible fluids, this top one. The below one is for a incompressible fluid. There are very good number of questions which can come upon this topic, right? Now after this class, let us continue tomorrow. And I'll continue with the concepts and we'll take up some questions, okay? We just are trying to make sure that these theoretical concepts, if they are not clear to you, although it's revision class, but if the theoretical concepts are not clear to you, we clarify them before we proceed to making examples or numericals or whatever questions. So, right? Anything anyone wants to ask from today's class? We learned a lot, in fact, today from the properties of, we did a quick revision, right? We understood that about stress and strain relationship once again. We saw different moduli of elasticity, Young's modulus, bulk modulus, and shear modulus, correct? We also saw what's Poisson's ratio. It's the ratio of lateral is to longitudinal strain. Then we saw potential energy in a rod or a stretched wire, which has been stretched by a distance of delta L. It's given by W is equal to half F delta L. And per unit volume, this potential energy is given as half stress into strain, and its value was half F into delta L if we just talk about potential energy. Whereas potential energy per unit volume or work done per unit volume is given as half stress into strain. Then we saw the concept of thermal stress, how compressive force is given by Young's modulus into cross-section area into coefficient of linear expansion alpha times of change in temperature delta theta. Then we saw in brief what is viscosity, right? The property of the liquid because of which there is resistive force acting between the layers of the liquid. We saw how viscous force is given by minus minus eta into a times of velocity gradient or change of velocity per unit length. It's called as velocity gradient, right? This is the value of viscous force. What force? Viscous force. Now we saw special value of viscous force given as 6 pi eta RV, also called as drag force. This is the special value of viscous force given for a spherical body. We saw the concept of terminal velocity when an object is falling down in a liquid. What are the net forces acting on it? They are mg, viscous force or drag force, and buoyancy. When the net force becomes zero, then velocity becomes equal to terminal velocity, which is given by this expression. What is to be remembered is terminal velocity is directly proportional to r square, difference of densities of liquid and solid, and inversely proportional to viscosity. That means for a fluid which has high viscosity, terminal velocity will be lesser. Terminal velocity will be lesser. That means here comes the example, Karuna, which you gave. That let's say we are taking honey and water. Let's say honey has more viscosity, so terminal velocity will be lesser there, right, Karuna? If the fluid has more viscosity, then the terminal velocity will be lesser in honey, correct?
Yes, sir.
And because it is lesser, terminal velocity is lesser, it means that object will move slower. If the velocity is less, of course, in honey, the object will move slower. Then we saw the relation between terminal velocity and mass. Terminal velocity is proportional to mass power 2 by 3. We also saw Stokes' law, which is given by 6 pi eta RV. Then we saw the concept of Reynolds number, which is tried to classify different kinds of flows. How do we do that? We generally say if the Reynolds number is less than 1000, then the flow which exists is called streamline flow. The flow which exists is called as streamline flow if the Reynolds number is less than 1000. If the Reynolds number is greater than 1500, then the flow which is there is called as turbulent flow. Then the flow which exists is called as turbulent flow. Please take this down. I think this is a new data. It might help you all. Streamline is all the layers are parallel to each other. All the layers over here, just the layers we saw now for the liquid, these layers are all moving parallelly to each other. Then such a flow is called as streamline. All particles at a point, whenever they reach a point, they are moving with the same velocity. So let's say this is the liquid. Every preceding particle, when it goes away and the new particle comes in front of in its place, then each one is having the same velocity at that point. This is called streamline flow. Streamline flow. Whereas if this does not happen and motion of the fluid is very much disordered, then that flow is called as turbulent flow. In turbulent flow, motion of the fluid is very much disordered. Whereas in streamline flow, it is very much ordered flow. In a systematic pattern, the liquid moves. Such a flow is streamline flow. Then we saw a question, right, based upon this agenda of Reynolds number. We saw then continuity equation, right? Rho1 V1 A1 is equal to Rho2 V2 A2. Until this we have completed. After just few number of topics, we have the example or the questions coming up. So we'll take those questions and try to finish this chapter in the coming classes, right? After which we'll be moving to class 12 syllabus, right? So thank you everyone for joining the class. I know the time we have taken is quite huge, but then I think it's helping. If it's helping at the end of the day, I am happy with that fact, right? So we are concerned that whether all of you are able to understand things or not, right? So if you are able to do that, I am really happy. So feel free to let me know if there are any queries with regards to whatever we have done. Please solve the assignments which I have given you. They are superbly important, are going to help you all a lot. And let us then meet in coming class to discuss further. So thank you everyone. Thanks a lot for being a part of the class. Let's meet soon. Thank you class. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Atul, tell me.
Sir, is there any relation between terminal velocity and time? Means a body in any medium, a body can attain terminal velocity faster if
Absolutely.
we are given two mediums.
See, Atul, have a look. I'll tell you one thing. Always, whenever you're talking about velocity, velocity is given as distance or displacement per unit time, right? Displacement per unit time. If you want to write the differential form of it, it is dx by dt, correct? So when I'm talking about terminal velocity, I am very sure about one relation. I'm very sure about one relation that whenever terminal velocity is higher, the time taken will be lesser for an object to fall down or let's say travel a certain path. And whenever the terminal velocity is lower, it means the object will take more time. So I'll call it as a slower motion, whereas this is a faster motion. This is a general relation between velocity and time, which will also be applicable in case of terminal velocity concept. Is this what you were asking or?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
okay, yeah, please take this down. This is the concept of, in general, about any velocity which is constant. Any constant velocity has this concept associated with it. And the same thing is true for terminal velocity. And the same thing is true for terminal velocity.
Yes, sir.
Right? Are we clear now, Atul, with,
Yes,
with
yes,
your
sir.
query?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. If we are clear, then let's close the session. Thank you, Atul. Anything else you want to ask?
No, sir. And sir, the velocity gradients of delta, what are delta V and delta
Yeah.
Y?
I'll tell you. Yeah, just one. So let's recall. Where was it? This one, right? Yeah. Ask the question. Yeah, tell me.
So what is delta V and delta Y?
So when I'm talking about delta V, you can call it difference between velocities of two layers. See here, velocity of one layer is V, whereas velocity of another layer is V minus delta
V
V.
minus
So the difference between velocities of two consecutive layers is delta V. I can write this here as, just a minute. Delta V is difference between velocities of, velocity of, I think velocities is right. Velocities of two consecutive layers. Whereas delta Y is the thickness of a layer. Thickness of each layer. This is called as velocity gradient. Let's say we are talking about very thin layers, each one with uh, a thickness of dr. Do you remember we had told that delta of r becomes dr for a very small value,
Yes.
small value. So therefore,
Yes.
if that change in velocity will also become small when we are talking about very thin layers which are placed close to each other. So therefore, this delta v becomes dv for small change in velocity between one layer and the other.
Okay.
So
And sir,
yeah,
they will remain constant for a given like medium.
it
For
depends.
a given medium.
It depends. It depends. In some question, you may be given that velocity is changing with y as y square. Then you will have dy, sorry, dv by dv by dy. Tell me, what will it be? You only tell me. Yeah. Let's say you are given that velocity is changing with y. Y is the upward direction, right? In the essence, v is equal to y square. Now tell me, how will you write d by dy? Tell me.
2y.
First of all, yeah, go ahead. Tell me. 2y,
2y.
right? Now suppose you are told that at y is equal to, you have to calculate velocity gradient at y is equal to 1. At y is equal to 1. Then what will be the velocity gradient? Tell me.
2.
2. Is it now clear?
Yes, sir. So what is y equals to 1? First layer.
So no, see here, y is basically the distance from the bottom. So when I say y is equal to 0, it will be the bottommost part. When I say y is equal to 1, it is 1 units above the ground or above the bottom surface. Because see here, what is delta y? Delta y is distance which is measured along y-axis, right? Distance which is measured along y-axis is delta y, correct?
Yes.
And
Yes, sir.
therefore, by y we are meaning the distance from the bottom of
Bottom.
the pipe wherever this liquid is flowing. Is the example
Yes, sir.
clear? Atul, are you able to comprehend this?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
So, in case an example of this sort comes, now you'll be able to solve it, right? Atul, if a question
Yes.
of this sort
Yes, sir.
comes, you'll be able to solve it, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else you want to ask? Yeah, tell me.
No, sir. No. Fine, sir.
Complete? Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Great. Great.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Sure, Atul. Most welcome. Thank you, Atul. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for being a part of the class. Let's meet tomorrow, right? Where we'll continue
Yes.
this and practice more number of questions, right? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.